Chapter 80, Preparing the Sacrifice, Part 2-2. The human-faced arachnid didn't make any moves after reappearing. It just used its 6 devilish eyes to stare coldly at this fellow on the same plane as it. The smoke man felt that he was in a nightmare, a dream of the end of the world. Everything would go back to normal once he woke up from this nightmare. He took several looks at the human-faced arachnid from all around. He was able to see that the human-faced arachnid had somewhat changed from the burning flames. The most straightforward of was as follows. The legs that had been severed from its side by Yan's blade were regrown this time around. The human-faced arachnid had the ability to rise anew from a bath of fire. Even if the smoke man's brain operated for 300 more cycles, he wouldn't be able to think that a human-faced arachnid had been hiding in the stomach original human-faced arachnid, or have similar outlandish and absurd thoughts. He knew that he couldn't let any problems happen with this human-faced arachnid owned by the secret order. This was a key existence for the foreseeable future of the Order of Bloodflame. The smoke man adjusted his mood. He also adjusted the transportation method of the energy and information of his consciousness, causing a link from between him and the human-faced arachnid. The arachnid didn't resist. Soon, his consciousness cut into the deepest layers of the human-faced arachnid. He saw the terrifying scene of the furnace of hell. The smoke man first let out a breath of relief. The Order of Bloodflame he belonged to had a doctrine. Mighty bloodflame will was hidden within the rage, hate, despair, and other intense and extreme emotions of every human. The arachnid didn't possess a concrete form. It didn't have explicit self-awareness. Yet it possessed strength, terror, power of absolute domination, and rampant and restless operational rules. And so, after obtaining this human-faced arachnid, the secret order took its most classical meditation environment and projected it onto the arachnid to form the foundation. They built a basic structure for future sacrifices. Nothing looked to have changed, but further steps of verification were needed. The smoke man continued to penetrate deeper into the arachnid. Soon there were peculiar sounds that came permeating up from the bottom of the fiery sea of magma. Blood, blood, blood. Fire, fire, fire. The monotonous and mad shouts converged into a rumbling cry that would make anybody anxious. But to the smoke man, the cry was quite close and dear. Moreover, it made him feel at ease. This was the prayer of the lowest level of the secret order, the prayer of the believers. The real prayer's sound was naturally much more complicated than this, but the human-faced arachnid before him was sustaining the structure, making it still impossible for the arachnid to replicate the prayer perfectly. It was only an approximate copy. The blood often referred to hate and rancor. The fire referred more towards the search for stimulation. Within these shouts of prayers, the smoke man was able to confirm that the structure of the Bloodsoul Temple implanted by the secret order still existed within the arachnid. The foundation had not been lost. Everything was well. He contacted the secret order through the Bloodsoul Temple. Soon a deep and firm will gave him a response. I am here. The smoke man completely relaxed when facing the first oblatum. Your Excellency, there's a bit of a situation with that matter from before. The first oblatum was familiar with what had been a hunt and feed operation. While the human-faced arachnid was hunting, the smoke man discovered a target that made the arachnid restless. This was Jack. The decision was hard to make back then, so he consulted with the first oblatum and received permission. Only then did he have the arachnid go hunt Jack. But even the first oblatum would likely find the following developments to be highly unimaginable. After hearing the brief report, the first oblatum actually wasn't that shocked, only responding with, "Mo Lun, has our mold been damaged?" The so-called mold was the human-faced arachnid. The smoke man, Mo Lun, had the fragment of the human-faced arachnid bathing in flame and being born a new flash in his mind. But describing such matters would be far too complicated. He just chose the important points and responded simply, "No, not especially. It even seemed to have leveled up a bit." It really is so. From here, I can feel a sort of psychic pressure that it never possessed before. The arrangement and the layers of the environment are increasing. Even though the Bloodflame will was never keen with order, going through its path would be a journey inevitably divided into highs and lows, far and near. It is as Your Excellency says. Mo Lun's mood had calmed down. The sacrificial ritual, erected over 40 years, is at hand. For the sake of restoring the Order's honor, our operation cannot have any crises or dangers. This is upheld by the Bloodflame will. Everything is fine as long as we can fulfill our ultimate objective. The first oblatum planned dully. Your grazing grounds already has a sole envoy. I will send out another and a means of transportation as well. Your mission now is to break away from the core of the storm as quickly as possible and bring back our mold safely. As you desire, Your Excellency." Mo Lun cut off the call, and his consciousness went a bit spellbound while wandering in the abyss of the fiery prison. It had already been 40 years. 40 years ago was the time when the Third World War was rapidly developing. The first oblatum of the Order of Bloodflame sensed the mighty Bloodflame will during the despair of war. His ability awakened, and he established the Order of Bloodflame on the battlefield. This was the earliest proven secret order of modern times. Mo Lun was considered an initiate clergyman. He was only 20 years old at the time. He was a new recruit from the battlefield. He obtained endless pleasure from the authority to massacre bestowed to him from the Bloodflame. The rapid development of the Order allowed him to possess achievements that a youngster would never dream of achieving. As a well-established secret order of the times, the Bloodflame once had astonishing glory. Their followers covered nearly 2/3 of the metropolises of the entire world. It was the first of the very few world-level orders back in the day. But all good things must come to an end. An excessively intense and extreme doctrine would lose its vigor upon losing the support from the environment of war and crisis. The Order rapidly declined after the war, and its doctrine underwent several major revisions. The Order split internally, attaching to external factors in an unforeseen change of events, cutting this powerful force into splintered branches. The branch Mo Lun was in could only shrink into an area of Xia City and rely on impressive combat strength of a high level to barely maintain the prestige of this secret order. Within the several years of change, the most important tool to realize the connection between the low-level believers and the Bloodflame will, the Order's sacrificial vessel, had unfortunately been damaged. This was yet another critical blow for the Order. The powerful sacrificial vessel was naturally the Bloodflame Order's pride. It was the legacy treasure that distinguished themselves from the heretic and knockoff groups. Because they had this sacrificial vessel, they were able to have those low-level followers possess a conventional channel to directly link with the mighty Bloodflame will, giving them the true feedback of mental manifestation interfering with reality. It coalesced the minds of men, cultivating the less advanced in the most optimal way. This was an order that was established on supernatural forces. Losing the sacrificial vessel was undoubtedly a fatal blow. It was also a bitter dishonor. Right now, their order was the same as those knock-off groups. Every one of their sacrificial rituals, no matter how big or small, needed the first oblatum to carry out their guidance. They used manpower to commune with the bloodflame will. The energy consumption was enormous. The restrictions were many. It was hard to make people believe in it, and it became the restricted order's greatest bottleneck to recover and grow. Mo Lun already had enough of these cursed days. He had experienced the most glorious period of the Order, and it was because of this that he could not bear the intolerable decay of the society these days. Nowadays, the Order paid an enormous price to receive a new method of acquiring a sacrificial ritual. The human-faced arachnid was the crux of the crux. It absolutely cannot fail. The mighty bloodflame will, I request your blessing. His conscience completed this simple prayer within the furnace of hell. He could feel the response of a certain hazy will from the deep abyss of the void, and it came in a clarity not often felt in recent years. It was as if there was truly a God looking down at him while towering from above. Chapter 81, Rending Body and Soul Part. Mo Lun had to make a revision as soon as the thought was born. Pardon me for my foolishness. Within the basic doctrine of the Bloodflame Order, the personification of gods in the world was not recognized. This was because the Bloodflame will existed in all personalities. It dominated all highly aware life forms under certain conditions. The essence of the Bloodflame will explain the extreme side of nature. Only through the extreme roads of blood and fire could one reach the apex of strength. It was truly very difficult for such a doctrine to gain favor under the backdrop of the modern world. It was because of this that the Order had unfolded several revisions to their doctrine over the course of several dozens of years. They buried most of the dividing, catastrophic causes of ruin. Mo Lun was an elder member of the Order. He was more inclined towards the traditional doctrine. He viewed the Bloodflame will as a guide to pursue eternal strength. He believed more in his own will and goals over the respectful and humble doctrine. But it would be impossible for him not to receive any influences or disturbances over the dozen years of chaos. He took that weak thought and concluded that it was just a foolish association with being confused for a time. He strove to collect his mind and forget his recent thoughts. He carefully recollected the words the first oblatum had just spoken, the layering within the furnace of hell. Indeed, a true comparison between before, a blindly fierce environment, and the current fiery prison would yield a subtle difference within. Notably was the tiny difference in the blood and fire shouts by the believers. Some fanatical and staunch sound grew clearer within the calls of the fiery prison, arousing even more reverberations. This could be said to be a definite feedback sufficient to prove that the construct of the Order's sacrificial vessel had indeed grown out of the embryonic stage. Mo Lun felt that tonight's hardships were worth it. His consciousness separated from the human-faced arachnid. His mood settled and calmed as he waited for the arrival of the sole envoy. The human-faced arachnid floated in the air, staying by Mo Lun. It was calm as well, at least on the surface. This is like a dove seizing a magpie's nest, or is this just wishful thinking? In the previous few minutes, the show Luo Nan watched had truly broadened his knowledge. Then he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What rebirth by flame? This was just the reappearance of the Wraith Sign after consuming its kind. The altar erected by the Wraith Sign was the battlefield for devouring its own kind. Upon the erection of the altar, under this sort of framework, it was an absolute impossibility for the original arachnid to be the same arachnid to come out alive. And so it was inevitable for the experienced Wraith Sign, who possessed the home ground advantage, to get an easy victory. This human-faced arachnid of the so-called Bloodflame Order had the construct of the Bloodfire Call of the Order's followers and the Bloodsoul Temple. It was nurtured very stylishly, but essentially at its core, the increase of its strength was actually finite. There was a large disparity between it and the sharpening, leveling between Rui Wen and the Wraith Sign. And after the Wraith Sign took the initiative to eat Jack's spiritual seed, this disparity grew even larger. Failure of the Bloodflame Arachnid was to be expected. This was proof as well that the sort of dark-side life form that was the human-faced arachnid was incapable of leveling up by itself, and that it was impossible for it to level up by eating low-level food. The grazing method of the Bloodflame Order was actually correct, but what a pity they had encountered a human-faced arachnid that was on a far higher level than the one they owned. They had encountered the Wraith Sign. After the Wraith Sign had consumed Jack's spiritual seed, Luo Nan could feel that the Wraith Sign was even stronger than the arachnid he had encountered back at the Limestone Water Village pub. At the very least, the Wraith Sign could be considered a match for it. Actually, there were some things about the Bloodflame Order that went beyond his expectations. Luo Nan didn't especially want any relationships to develop between him and this order. When Mo Lun went to attack the Dark Chains, Luo Nan didn't resist him head-on. Instead, he had separated from the arachnid and left the moment the Wraith Sign had erected the altar and directly controlled the situation. Luo Nan and Mo Lun didn't see each other since. When the Wraith Sign prevailed against its own kind and was busy taking over the fruits of battle, Luo Nan never expected that the surviving bit of driving means within the human-faced arachnid would bring the Wraith Sign to the side of this mysterious power. The furnace of hell within the human-faced arachnid had already been brought into the altar's framework at this time. The Wraith Sign just didn't have the time to gather it up. Mo Lun was totally unaware. He was in the format of pure consciousness. All the operations of the energy and information of his contacting, sensing, praying, and thoughts were completely unconcealed. It was tantamount to taking all his secrets and laying it out bare. He was not to be outdone by Jack. It felt great to wield other people's secrets, but some headaches were popping up when trying to figure out how to leave. After all, Luo Nan couldn't let the Wraith Sign seriously go with Mo Lun and do some sacrificial vessel things. The psychic wave network, having just recovered normal communications, reverberated with He Yuan's voice. "Scout, you're okay, right?" "Yeah, I'm fine." Luo Nan's soul body hovered in the skies, observing downward. He saw He Yuan furrow her brows as she talked with him. She smoothed the appearance of her brows after receiving his response. Luo Nan felt quite good. Actually, without taking into regard with the Wraith Sign's current dilemma, Luo Nan's state wasn't just fine, it was excellent. It wasn't good, it was great. He had supported the activities of yet another altar, and he was inseparably tied to the Wraith Sign's victory, allowing him to receive direct benefits. These benefits far exceeded what he had received with Rui Wen. Of course, this didn't include soul breathing. Once the mental storm stopped, Luo Nan's range of mental senses would start to rapidly recover. Based on concrete data, The most direct observation of his mental senses would increase its range by 50–60% from 500 meters to reach a radius of nearly 800 meters. The expansion of the range of his senses was proof that the amount of information and energy Luo Nan could command had increased substantially. The precision also subsequently increased as a result. After the growth of his ability, Luo Nan naturally had the desire to show off. The society probably started their chase of the human-faced arachnid right about now. Luo Nan really was eager to give things a try. Just kidding. Luo Nan was really thinking if it was possible to borrow the society's forces to give the Wraith Sign a chance to escape. But he never expected that Yuan would speak the following words: "The operation has been concluded. Return immediately." We're not chasing. Chase who? The one who was plotting against you. The one who interfered with the psychic wave network. Luo Nan really wanted to guide the society's forces towards Mo Lun. His words were urging. Yuan was silent for a moment before suddenly facing Giant Arm, Crag burst, and the others with a hand signal. Then her voice suddenly turned low and soft, almost non-existing. It was as if she was scared that the enemy would be scared into motion. "You see him, you must not move by all means right now. This person's strength is extremely powerful. Right now you're just a crow, don't think of anything else. Just let him go." Wait, that person already left, but he should still be within this group of high-rise buildings. So no chasing. Yuan was startled. She faced Giant Arm and the others, who were already prepared to mobilize, with a signal to stop. Her voice returned to normal and she spoke with resolution. "You are to return at once. Today's mission has terminated." But Luo Nan didn't know what words would be right to say for a time. He could obviously see that Yuan's series of changes were all for the sake of his safety. But what would happen to the Wraith Sign over with Mo Lun? Chapter 81, Rending of Body and Soul, Part 2-2. Mr. Luo. Yuan addressed him differently, further emphasizing the end of the operation. She explained to Luo Nan, "Different mission objectives need different mission deployments. Different people to execute the mission is needed as well. The troops that faced off against Jack may not be suitable for facing the human-faced arachnid and the power behind it. And the society has an approximate lock on the enemy's identity. There will be follow-up measures executed to handle the situation." But right now, there wasn't. Luo Nan knew that he shouldn't be selfish and place his comrades of the society in dangerous circumstances. And the existence of the Wraith Sign was something that absolutely could not be exposed. When all was said and done, he would need to think of a way on his own. "Understood, I will return immediately." After confirming that Mo Lun would not leave this area for a while, Luo Nan ordered Ink to fly back. But he never expected Yuan's words to be the following: "Mr. Bai is right here. He can give you an examination on the situation with your sent soul." Luo Nan nearly made Ink knock itself unconscious against the bell tower. Yuan had mentioned Mr. Bai while Luo Nan contacted her at the fighting arena. Luo Nan didn't take it seriously at the time, but now his feelings were completely different. Disregard the fact that Mr. Bai had been extremely passive when facing Mo Lun. On the mental plane, the mesh smoke-style permeating attack was extremely exquisite. Luo Nan probably couldn't hide Ink's circumstances from this man. It wasn't a big deal to reveal his out-of-body state, but to hide it for so long and have it exposed was something very awkward to experience. Luo Nan really didn't have a good solution. He could only take things as they come. While they were speaking, Yuan and the others began to clean the battlefield. Although the course of events was a bit complicated, all the participating members of the operation escaped unharmed. The atmosphere was quite relaxed. Rui Wen, who was injured in a coma, was already lifted in a prepared ambulance for emergency treatment in order to reduce the radiation damage. As for the other, Jack's corpse was hauled back. A group of people surrounded the body studying it. It was called a corpse, but it was actually just the exoskeleton armor of a deep blue walker. It didn't matter whether it was inside or outside. It was all messy. Various human tissue, broken components, made it give off the feeling of a trash heap. It was impossible to see the might that faced off against Crag Burst and Giant Arm. The flapping of wings could be heard in the air. Ink flapped its wings and flew in through the window of the abandoned floor. Compared to its same species, its large body and astonishing speed made it rather eye-catching. It drew in everyone who was cleaning the battlefield to raise their heads and look at it. Mr. Bai, who had been nursing his mind all this time, raised his head and looked. He wasn't superfluous. An intent like light smoke spilled out from the depths of the void, locking onto the crow. Luo Nan rushed to have ink descend to the ground in front of the sitting Mr. Bai. At the same time, he greeted through the hexia. "Hi, Mr. Bai, I've troubled you." He felt like he was a patient seeking an examination, and that Mr. Bai was a medical expert, a profound doctor. Mr. Bai split his lips into a laugh. This old man, famous for his dream techniques, had a casual, lazy attitude. He sat on the ground with a stooped back, looking like he could fall asleep and take a nap at any second. However, eyes quite bright were underneath Mr. Bai's half-closed eyelids. They headed together with the smoke cloud pervading on the mental plane to cover Ink's body. Soon he went, "Oh." Yuan and Crag Burst had already walked over earlier on. They maintained some distance to avoid disturbing Mr. Bai's examination. Seeing Mr. Bai's response, Crag Burst, who had concluded that it was an attached soul early on, couldn't help asking, "What is it? An attached soul or a sent soul?" "I can't tell for the time being, Mr. Bai was actually quite forthright. Then he followed up immediately with praise. "It's a little bit different than what I previously imagined. Little Luo knows what he's doing with this method. The technique is quite meticulous. This standard's not bad, not bad." Luo Nan didn't really cover things up. Ability users on Mr. Bai's level would just need to pay careful attention. The faintly glowing graphical structure could not be concealed under the wings of the crow. After hearing Mr. Bai talk about it, Yuan and Crag Burst then discovered the situation. Yuan hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Format. Much thanks for swallowing the word archetype." Luo Nan sighed a hidden sigh of lament. The degree of awareness of Yan Hong's archetype format was truly deeply rooted within burners, within ability users. This was something that would need quite a bit of time to change. Crag Burst scratched his head, speaking, "I don't recall seeing this figure in the beginning, but I saw it when we came rushing over here." Luo Nan rushed to explain, "I only comprehended it just recently. The main thing is that it's a conditioning state." Yuan set the tone with a single sentence. "Are there any dangers with this? Reason says that the more order it has, the less dangerous it is. But we can't make a rash conclusion." Mr. Bai stood up upon speaking. "How about this? We are pretty much done with matters over here. I don't really have anything to do. How about I go on a trip with little Luo to the hospital and do some testing, some looking, some comparing?" It would all be good. Yuan responded, that would be the best. I'll arrange a car. Although Mr. Bai looked to be disheveled, as soon as he moved to action, he moved truly like thunder and wind. And there was Yuan, who was sprightly and efficient. Luo Nan didn't have the time to speak further before he was brought onto a flying car, headed to Xia City's Renai Hospital. The rest didn't really matter. The one thing that made Luo Nan worried was the increasing distance between him and the Wraith Sign. Luckily, the connection between the two of them remained stable and hidden so far. Mr. Bai asked Luo Nan several more questions in the car, the main of which was how did Luo Nan construct the connection between him and the crow, how did Luo Nan control it, and other similar details. Luo Nan saw that this was his chance. He took the initiative to describe Ink's history, and he spoke not completely truthfully. Back when I sensed Ink and locked onto him, it seemed that I became aware of the out-of-body state. This was a pre-concealment of the likely exposure in the future. But Mr. Bai clearly didn't think too much about it. He just laughed in delight after hearing Luo Nan. Out-of-body state. Kids shouldn't bite off more than they can chew. You have yet to awaken. Even if you go out of your body for a short time, you'll instantly be scattered into the wind. Your soul will fly away and disperse with nothing left to be saved. It's that dangerous. From ancient times until now, the price is disastrous. Mr. Bai shook his head and sighed. In our ancestors' time, the out-of-body state was said to call and attract dark gods. It was quite forbidden and was considered quite reckless to do so. The people who did left the world tragically. Since you have this sort of awareness, you might as well read the books on it that the society collected and revised. It is good to have a reference, to develop what is good and discard what is bad. I'll keep this in mind. Luo Nan finally understood why Crag burst, Yuan and Mr. Bai didn't think about the out-of-body line of thought. They considered his circumstances using common sense. They never imagined that Luo Nan would have the Wraith Sign by his side acting as an external fuel tank. It could act as his lifeline, giving him more time in the out-of-body state. While Luo Nan and Mr. Bai were conversing, Luo Nan's soul body flew at demonic speeds to arrive half a step earlier at Xia City's Renai Hospital. It was undoubtedly an impossible task to rely only on Ink, a mere crow, to let Luo Nan recover his consciousness. To avoid things from becoming awkward, Luo Nan would need to settle the matter ahead of time. The subtle connection to Luo Nan's main body didn't need a specific response. Luo Nan's mind just stirred, and his soul body headed back inside his main body. The mental plane and the material plane converged in this moment. Like a rock being cast down from high above, it jolted with a thump, bringing out circles and circles of ripples. During the surge that was brought by entering his body, Luo Nan opened his eyes and gazed at the ceiling of the hospital with its monotonous pattern. He grinned and chuckled, but then his expression froze on the spot. Luo Nan felt a stabbing pain in the space between his eyebrows in the next instant. A small hole split open in the thin layer of skin on his forehead, and blood seeped out from within. Chapter 82, Soul Env, Part. Luo Nan did not dare to make a move. His entire body was frozen like a block of wood. But he couldn't just stay frozen, for it wasn't just his forehead. He felt a tearing sensation come from the flesh of his scalp, cheeks, shoulder, back, and many other places, and the sensation continued to spread. It was as if his body had suddenly turned into a thin bag filled with blades. Just the slightest movement would cause a myriad of blades to pierce his body as a result. His body and soul were gravely out of harmony. Luo Nan's insight and knowledge had made great progress. He was able to capture the root of his troubles in an instant. He recalled having heard Yuan mention his critical issue of his mind and fleshly body being unbalanced and overspecialized. It was only a conceptual understanding at the time. Now he had experienced it personally at last. His soul and fleshly body were from the same source, merged as one body. Energy and information intercommunicated and interoperated in a synchronized operation. There was a natural, relative, and harmonic tempo. Even if something somewhere may overstep its bounds, it had been still possible to adjust it back in range. But then the strength of Luo Nan's soul had received the gains of 2 altars in a row within the span of a night, increasing his strength greatly. He also understood the mysteries of soul breathing. The corresponding operation of energy and information was simply a transformation. And this transformation was rapidly fed back into his fleshly body upon uniting the two as one. It was good that the strength of his soul had increased, and soul breathing was something even better. Soul breathing gave the current Luo Nan the ability to interfere with the material and mental plane, the ability to utilize the operation of energy and information to the highest effect. The problem was as follows. The foundation for body and soul were different when all was said and done. It could be seen from the Tower of Babel of the Dynamo Core. The soul, this thing, was pretty much a structure that was the combination of energy and information. It just needed a fundamental framework to operate under, and things would be good. It didn't matter how complicated the adjustments were. Oftentimes, only a thought was needed. But the fleshly body was limited to basic matter. Every functional system, organ, and tissue had different carrying capacity, tolerance, and etc. To transmit energy and information would require the use of various chemical carriers. This was an extremely complicated, comprehensive system. Luo Nan had started with his nervous system. He had used all sorts of nerve drugs to roam along the line between life and death. He used a full 5 years to modify the structure of his body and barely reach the needs of the format, "My heart's a prison." How would it be possible for him to catch up to a new tempo with soul breathing within a second? Only through contrast could one see the difference. Right now Luo Nan could see where Rui Wen's godlike talent lay. She didn't look particularly strong, but she was able to catch up and adjust to the changes to her soul tempo from beginning to end. It didn't matter how extreme the circumstances, she was able to maintain it. This was a function that far exceeded what ordinary people could do. Envy was pointless right now. That one instant only lacerated his muscle, so Luo Nan should be rejoicing. If it was his weak and susceptible nervous system, if something went wrong with his hormone system, the system of his body would likely crash on the spot, or unpredictable changes in development would occur. Rejoicing was also useless. If the situation were to continue, Luo Nan's worries would have an enormous probability of coming true. "Hello, little Nan," lost in thought. Mr. Bai's void transmitted over the hexia, making Luo Nan recall that he was by Mr. Bai's side heading towards the hospital. They could see the building of the hospital by now. Luo Nan let go of the head-aching matters over here for the time being. He had already thought of an excuse. "There seems to be a response with my main body." "That's great," Mr. Bai was a bit surprised, but he was very happy. "This shows that the connection between your soul and body is extremely close. We can eliminate many issues. Come, Let's strike while the iron's hot. Mr. Bai opened the car window upon speaking, indicating to Ink to fly outside. Go back to your main body right now. See if you can do it. I'm going to greet the contacts of the society within the hospital and get a temporary identity. We can talk openly later and keep in touch in the future. This was all within Luo Nan's expectations. He gave Mr. Bai a word of thanks on the spot and spurred Ink to flap its wings and soar towards the direction of the hospital. Ink found Luo Nan's ward quite accurately, stopping outside the window. Then he gave Mr. Bai the good news 2 seconds later. There are no problems on my end anymore. And so, the entire show went flawlessly. If one were to ignore the huge problem with the imbalance between his body and soul. Mr. Bai chuckled in laughter. It's best that it was a false alarm. Right now it's already past midnight. You should rest, recuperate for a bit. Let us meet again during the early morning rounds. You should call me by Professor Bai, with a yell at that time. Luo Nan really wanted to ask this authority on soul science for guidance on this issue with his soul-body imbalance. But his show had developed to this degree. Some words were truly hard to speak. In the end, he was an introvert. He had already responded automatically after a moment's hesitation. Okay, thank you, Mr. Bai. The communications between the two were ended for now. Luo Nan then made a call with He Yuan, and Crag burst to ease their worries. He focused his attention back on his own body after a round of notifying. The lacerating sensation in his muscles had spread a step further. This was something that could be concretely felt. If the pain nerves of his inner organs didn't have this situation, there wouldn't be anything to describe. Luo Nan sighed a breath. He had to act very carefully when performing this mere action. Otherwise, something else somewhere else would be lacerated within him. Obviously, this couldn't go on. He was paralyzed. He was super paralyzed. What did that moment's hesitation cost him in the end? Luo Nan felt that he had committed his own folly. In the end, he wasn't a genuine idiot who stubbornly insisted on his own ideas. He knew that he absolutely couldn't be stupid under these circumstances. He had to go contact Mr. Bai again at once. But then the Wraith Sign's information was sent back from the nightclub several kilometers away at this moment. There was a change in the situation there. The Bloodflame Order's Mo Lun had ordered the Human-Faced Arachnid into action. This was not the original Human-Faced Arachnid. Right now, only a shell remained of the method the Bloodflame Order instilled on the Arachnid. It made the Wraith Sign, who was lacking intelligence, have some difficulties understanding Mo Lun's intentions. Luo Nan sighed again. His soul went out of his body, temporarily casting off the restrictions of his fleshly body. He went all out to respond to the change in circumstances there yonder. Luo Nan had an approximate understanding of the situation through the Wraith Sign. Mo Lun had ordered the Human-Faced Arachnid because 2 soul envoys had arrived. Mo Lun didn't know that the Ability User Society had no intention of continuing their hunt for him. He still conducted evacuation plan in accordance with the secret order. The so-called soul envoys looked to be a young man and a young woman who liked to have fun. They were now mingling in the nightclub with its great number of people. They didn't look out of place at all. But this pair, after entering into the room where Mo Lun and the Human-Faced Arachnid were at and verifying their locations, immediately kneeled to the ground and prayed in silence, even though they could not see anything on the mental plane. The 2 people's bodies swayed inexplicably during their prayer. They went dazed, immediately falling to the ground, losing all consciousness. Luo Nan saw this very clearly. The moment they went into a coma, all conscious activity was lost. Right now, the man and woman on the ground were just two empty shells of flesh, or perhaps one could say two vessels. Mo Lun's plans so far were absolutely clear. As expected, Mo Lun then controlled the Wraith Sign to have it enter the body of the female soul envoy, borrowing the air of life to mask the arachnid to the largest degree. As for Mo Lun himself, he threw himself into the fleshly body of the male soul envoy without any restraint at all. The male soul envoy was unconscious, his body still in shock to the point of collapsing on the ground in weakness. A fine, bloody hole split open at his temples. The surrounding veins pulsed and throbbed. Chapter 82, Soul Envy, Part 2-2. It was as if Luo Nan was looking at a rerun of the terrible misfortune that happened to his own body. The current situation was clear. The fleshly body of the soul Env could not bear the strength of Mo Lun's soul being instilled. An injury had arisen in the body. But how would Mo Lun resolve this problem? What if he encountered some unfortunate mishap? He couldn't just force the soul envoy to battle. The soul envoy could become mincemeat at any time. Using the Wraith Sign as a node and a screen, Luo Nan opened his God view to observe Mo Lun's actions from all angles. Mo Lun was completely unaware of Luo Nan. He just kept his routine of adjustment, letting the soul envoy gradually adapt the instillment of his soul with its strength. Since the Wraith Sign was there, Mo Lun had exposed his own method of operating energy and information. Luo Nan made conjectures as he observed, so he was able to practically complete Mo Lun's steps. So it was like this. Luo Nan was like an apprentice. He observed the actions of his instructor and he started to give it a shot himself. The first was to limit the self. The tempo of soul breathing was adjusted to be lower, slowing the speed and efficiency of the operation of energy and information, so much so that some was intentionally blocked. This lessened the enormous pressure that was brought to the body. The range of Luo Nan's mental senses began to shrink greatly. It went from a radius of 800 meters to under 10 meters. This was approximately 1% of the mental senses of his soul body. It was impossible to shrink it down any further. This preserved the current soul configuration and tempo to their lowest limits. This was a basic unit. But even though it was a basic unit, it was a factor higher than the 500-meter radius of last night. The pressure brought by the processing of information was still substantial. The second step was needed at this time, maintaining distance. Luo Nan followed Mo Lun's method. He let his soul body lean towards the depths of the mental plane to maintain a close yet distant state with his fleshly body. Yep, it was like he was dreaming. Mo Lun had used this method to decrease the pressure against the fleshly body of the soul envoy. But the largest problem was as follows. The information exchanged between the material plane and mental plane was a bit delayed, a bit displaced, influencing the secretion of some neurotransmitters. The mind became muddled. It was like sleepwalking or even being high on drugs. In the end, this was just a plan of convenience. It really didn't get to the root of the problem. Luo Nan was a bit disappointed. But no matter how it was, this sort of method could help him break free from the awkward state of paralysis. Mo Lun didn't leave the nightclub in a rush after finishing sending his soul. Instead, he led the Wraith Sign out the room to walk around the nightclub. The sent soul form was calibrated to an optimal state. Observing had lost its value for the time being. Luo Nan's mind returned back. He couldn't help yawning, and he nearly fell asleep. He really didn't want to scare his family by falling asleep again. He forced his urges back by shaking his head as he got up. The faint light of day passed through the cotton curtains into the room. It was as if time had flown. It was already morning in the blink of an eye. He thought of the chaotic twists and turns that happened during the first half of the night, and he thought of how fast time had flowed. The contrast between then and now was clear, and it made Luo Nan moved rather emotionally for a time. Luo Nan performed another deep breath, but then an itching sensation suddenly exploded in his throat halfway through. His airflow diverted paths, choking him within an inch of his life on the spot. He coughed over and over, nearly unable to catch his breath. The communications device at the head of the bed rang at this moment. His aunt's voice transmitted over with extreme delight. "Nan Nan, you woke up." He wanted to say hello to his aunt, but his intense coughing prevented him from opening his mouth at all. He could only raise his hand with all his strength to respond. Luo Nan's intensive care ward had been specially prepared by the society through the hospital. There was a 24-hour AI monitoring system, and there was a pair of nurses allocated to him, a specialty nurse and a robot nurse. Actually, their real objective was to prevent his family from nursing him so that they could clear up space for what was to come. Due to this hospital's system, Mrs. Luo Shuking could only observe Luo Nan's real-time situation through an internet stream. She never thought that she would see Luo Nan sit up on the same day he was admitted, in this early morning. This happy moment of surprise was seriously very important. But it was hard to avoid being worried when seeing Luo Nan endlessly gasping for breath. The door to the room was opened right when she was about to call for medical help. A grandiose doctor and nurse entered inside. The daily rounds had started. Astonishingly, Mr. Bai was lined up within this group. He was even in the center. This little old man had just casually put on a white gown, and Luo Nan noticed that the doctor in charge addressed him as Professor Bai with complete respect. "Oh, the little fellow woke up. This saves quite a bit of work." The nurse stepped forward to do the routine inspections the instant Mr. Bai started cracking jokes. She pulled up the monitoring data from last night for Mr. Bai to refer to. Mr. Bai already had a firm view on what had happened last night. He just skimmed over the data and continued to clown around with Luo Nan. "What's wrong with your forehead? You didn't wake up by falling, did you?" The injury to Luo Nan's forehead was just his skin tissue tearing. A scab had long since formed, stopping the blood. It looked like he had scraped against something. The faint bloody scar was quite eye-catching since it was on the forehead. "Cough, don't know, hit something." Luo Nan still couldn't stop coughing. He could only speak in stutters. Mr. Bai walked over beaming with laughter. He used his hands to examine the situation with Luo Nan's body. In other words, he was opening, closing Luo Nan's eyelids, and so on. At the same time, Luo Nan's hexia transmitted Mr. Bai's voice over. "Idiot. You should be saying, 'Why am I here?' or something like that, okay? Cough, why am I here?" Luo Nan's brain was constantly dazed due to the residual effects of reducing his soul's pressure. He really would say whatever Mr. Bai wanted. He was extremely obedient. Mr. Bai was greatly delighted. Luo Nan was young enough to be his grandson. He patted Luo Nan's head in passing, showing that this boy was worth teaching. Then he said, "It's nothing. Little fellow, you must have had a lot of stress lately. You have a bit of OCD. Your guardian is here, right? Tell them of your circumstances later." I'll go downstairs immediately. Mrs. Luo Shuking didn't go home yesterday. She just stayed the night at a nearby hotel. She notified her husband of Luo Nan waking up, then she rushed over to the hospital. She watched the whole medical examination events from beginning to end through the internet stream. She rushed to respond through the communication device at the head of the bed. No rush, no rush. Mr. Bai's mouth had spoken these words, but he grabbed Luo Nan's two hands. He indicated to Luo Nan to open up the thumb and forefinger on his left hand. He lightly kneaded and pressed Luo Nan's thumb on his right hand. He demonstrated the contact point, the technique, and the pressure once more. You can deal with the severity of your coughing in this way for now. Focus your thoughts. Eliminate your heart from distractions. Okay. Luo Nan acted according to Mr. Bai's words. Sure enough, the coughing symptom was somewhat relieved. He nodded his head in response on the spot. Mr. Bai walked out with all smiles and hands clasped behind his back. The connection via the hexia was never cut off, however. Mr. Bai even shared information, letting Luo Nan know his following route. Mr. Bai symbolically examined a few more patients before meeting with Mrs. Lu Shuking. The following pretext was different than what was given in the ward. I can make a preliminary diagnosis that it is an autonomic nerve disorder or dysautonomia from looking at the current situation. This was brought on by either extreme stress or angry emotions. Did he get angry with anyone in the family last night? Mr. Bai brought out the attitude of a psychic. He asked the question knowing full well the answer, drawing in Mrs. Luo Shuking instantly. Chapter 83, Auction Part. No, someone outside the family had. Luo Shuking thought of the scene last night at the restaurant and was unable to prevent her chest from tightening and her heart from speeding up. She ground her teeth hard. That scoundrel! How dare he pull Luo Nan by the neck and threaten him? Mr. Bai nodded his head. Well, in any case, the disease has already appeared. What follows is the issue with treatment. Yesterday, you did an examination over at Anhai, and the overall situation was explained at that time. There are two particular points about the patient. The first is his age. He's right in the middle of puberty. The second is his genetic history. These points must be considered. Even Mrs. Luo Shuking, an intelligent and capable woman, could only be at this doctor's mercy when having access to unequal amounts of information. She was ill at ease, asking, "You're saying?" Overall, I propose a drugless treatment. Taking medication may not be a good method for such a young boy. Instead, adjusting his environment is preferred, a self-adjustment. The atmosphere of the family is very important at his current stage. Control over his self-behavior is also very important. Simply speaking, he needs to loosen and relax. He needs to routinely rest. I don't suggest that he engages in heavy physical or mental activity. Of course, his current symptoms of drowsiness, coughing, and so on will need to be dealt with in order to avoid affecting his quality of his life. How about this? First, have him stay 2 days in the hospital. Have him soak in the health pod and do some mental therapy to let him learn how to relax his mind. Mrs. Luo Shuking didn't even have the time to respond when Luo Nan could not hold back any more from within the ward. "Mr. Bai, why do I need to be hospitalized?" "Because you're really sick. Your autonomic nervous system has been damaged." Mr. Bai deserved to be called an authority on soul science. He had studied the mind to an extremely deep level. He was more than enough even if he was multitasking between Luo Nan and his aunt. The sudden emergence of your coughing is the most obvious proof. And right now, you're still very drowsy. Who took a look at you, with your dead-ridden and drooping eyes at this early morning? For a young man who can already send his soul to have these symptoms appear, clearly, there's an issue with a physiological mechanism. Luo Nan was actually speechless for a time. He watched Mr. Bai skillfully speak a few sentences to handle formalities for his aunt with utter delight. Luo Nan pondered for quite a while before speaking. Is it because of the imbalance between body and soul? You having this self-awareness is quite good. Mr. Bai sighed a breath. I can see that you have quite the talent for soul science. You were able to use the method of sending and attaching the soul, all self-taught. And you were also able to open the hole for the out-of-state body somewhere last night. Your study of the mind has progressed even further. I just surmised recently that your ability on the mental plane is rather systematic. Even I would find it hard to form my body as one by myself and avoid producing even larger problems. But the more things are like this, the more troublesome things are. You need to know that the rate of improvement of our bodies is far too small compared to our souls. It is quite easy for the body to get lost behind. There were many experts of the old generation back in ancient times who had an imbalance between their soul and fleshly body. They discarded their fleshly body, perhaps believing themselves infallible, perhaps being compelled to, and in the end, they could only fall as errant souls. They could only become wandering ghosts as their body and mind completely perished, leaving this earth. We must learn from our predecessors. We can't be careless. Luo Nan felt that he was quite innocent. He understood the reason behind Mr. Bai's words. But the mad expansion of his soul's strength over the course of the night, could that still have been his mistake? All right then, he didn't need to mention these symptoms to Mr. Bai anymore. Luo Nan asked probingly, do I start tempering my body from now on? Mr. Bai scoffed at Luo Nan's words. Based on your sick body. Right now, the most important thing is to nurse back your health. The health pod of Renai Hospital is quite effective. Go through a round of treatment and see the results. Relax. This isn't your typical consumer product. It uses a nutrient solution specifically provided by the society. Your injury counts as a work injury. Wait until the end of the observation period. If you want to get even better results, you can get in contact with expert pharmaceutical chemists of the society. 1 to 2 honor points is more or less enough for someone to concoct a customized compound for you. Oh right. You just entered the society. Do you understand honor points? I do, but drugs are still going to be used for this. Luo Nan saw early on that Mr. Bai was the sort of zany person who wasn't bothered by the little things. He was warm-hearted, so Luo Nan was quite relaxed when saying, you even said that this would be a drugless treatment. I was afraid that your guardian would give you those consumer products on the market. Besides whether or not the drug is proper for you, there's also the matter of how severe the stimulation could be. Wouldn't matters become much more troublesome this way? Mr. Bai then gave an introduction on a few expert pharmaceutical chemists of the society. But Luo Nan felt a surge of drowsiness in his brain after listening to just a few sentences. He was not able to concentrate, so he dimly responded with a sentence. How's bro Octopus? You're familiar with Octopus. Mr. Bai could see Luo Nan's state, so he didn't find it an annoyance. He just explained the facts truthfully, that young fellow's not bad, but his specialty is in drugs that stimulate one's potential and hallucinogens. This doesn't fit with your situation. But as a pharmaceutical chemist, his network is much broader than mine. You can consult him for his opinion. Luo Nan's impression towards this warm-hearted and selfless old man grew all the more favorable. He promptly gave his thanks. Mr. Bai re-emphasized a few taboos he must take note of before letting Luo Nan sleep a bit. Luo Nan's sleeping would make it convenient for Mr. Bai to do a few more examinations in the hospital. Luo Nan really couldn't hold it any longer. He spoke another word of thanks and then fell back on the bed. But he never expected the Hexia to transmit new information over. It was a briefing about last night's mission. From Luo Nan's understanding, getting a brief meant that he was getting on a points. Right now was precisely the time to use points. He forced back his urge to sleep and opened the briefing. It looked like the briefing was still written by He Yuan. It was concise and clear. Luo Nan skimmed over the description of the course of events for the operation, and then he went to look for the evaluation and points that pertained to himself. Luo Nan's performance in the operation was mainly in regards to him discovering the issue in the preceding stage. And within the preceding stage of the operation, he accomplished his scouting mission outstandingly. He produced the factor for the society to stop Jack, but other things weren't explicitly reflected in the brief. So his evaluation was lower than last time by a bit. He was given a C+ and 3 honor points. He was still ranked in the first tier. Right now he had reached 7 honor points in total. He had accumulated them at astonishing speed. It looked like he was seriously going to go get an understanding of the society's shop right now. Soon he flipped to the end of the brief. Luo Nan discovered that the form of this brief was different than the one before at this time. This briefing had a link attached marked Spoils of War. Luo Nan found out, after opening, that the society had a Spoils of War auction system all along. Anything that was reaped within the operation would be taken out for display. The participating members of the operation would then visually assess the items on their value and grade in an auction. This was how they determined who gets what. As for the reapings here, obviously, it would mainly consist of items that had come from Jack's body. They included a medium-sized transport vehicle, the remains of a deep blue walker exoskeleton armor, detection scanner instruments, second-hand altered human components, and so on. Of course, the most eye-catching of all was obviously that deep-sea Type 4 Dynamo Core. Luo Nan stared at the digital interface for quite a while. At long last, he couldn't hold back from coughing and laughing. He was greatly delighted. Yan Yongbo must be quite anxious over there. Chapter 83, Auction Part 2-2. Chapter 83, Auction Part 2-2. Translation, Sarah. Of the reapings, the thing that caught Luo Nan's attention was definitely the deep-sea Type 4 Dynamo Core. He remembered watching all of the fine threads being recovered after the core had lost the stimulus of energy and information. The wheat-like structure became loose, and it was basically reduced to a fine needle of 4 to 5 centimeters. It was honestly very similar to his external neuron, a top-notch product that was likely related to the external neuron that was in his possession. It was a clue that was very likely to have a direct correlation to his father's whereabouts. For this reason, Luo Nan was extremely interested in this item. Moreover, Luo Nan had observed most of the negotiation between Jack and Yan Yongbo. This allowed him to naturally understand the value of the core and its associated technology. For interested parties, the total value of all the other items from the reaping would not add up to half of the core's worth. Luo Nan immediately went to check on the Dynamo Core at the auction. However, the digital interface showed that the piece was still at its valuation stage. It seemed like even the association could not accurately settle its value. Jack's cerebral nucleus was also at its valuation stage. This was quite surprising. Although the cerebral nucleus was the key processing center for an altered human and provided for its advanced thinking and emotion, it was still considered a mass-produced item. Therefore, it should not have the same status as the Dynamo Core. Oh wait, I think I remember this thing being wrapped inside the core. Luo Nan thought back to the situation at the time. After the core had disassembled from its metallic, wheat-like form, the cerebral nucleus had indeed fallen out from it. Even while testing Jack's cerebral nucleus earlier, the core was found to be orbiting around the outside of the nucleus. It was unknown whether there were special conditions within. Jack was too mysterious. Yesterday night, the original plan was to get to the bottom of Yan Yongbo. However, a sudden turn of events led to the current scene. Jack was one of the main catalysts of this incident. What deep blue world, and what apocalypse laboratory! It was utterly unheard of. If it wasn't for Jack, how could Luo Nan have known about these things? After Jack died, many leads were lost. It was unknown whether the association could put in more effort to unearth relevant information. If not, Luo Nan would have to do it himself. As he was pondering over Jack's secrets, Cragburst's loud voice suddenly cut through. Hey, Scout, are you all right? How do you feel after sleeping? I still want to sleep. After last night's fine play, Luo Nan and Cragburst's friendship was no longer simple. Luo Nan didn't hide things from him. Still sleeping, Rui Wen is as well, but worse. She hasn't even woken up yet, but her wounds are more severe than yours. With wounds that severe, it's not a bad idea to sleep a bit more. Even though they were not together, Luo Nan was well aware of the situation through the tower's various intermediary effects. According to his predictions, it would be hard for her to rouse within the next 2 days. Rui Wen was talented in dealing with crises. She had the instincts to keep operating, even when she was in a coma. During continuous combat, her tempo was founded upon quick recovery. However, once the situation calmed down, her rhythm would become extremely slow, and she would require a long sleep to recharge. Her ability to adapt to changing environments and to accurately adjust tactics accordingly was a skill that Luo Nan really needed to learn. Right, do you want to take part in the auction? Luo Nan jolted, snapping out from his sleepiness. How did you know? Look at the screen. It clearly shows who's online and who's following. You didn't even know this, and you expect to win against your opponents. Cragburst erupted with laughter. Luo Nan knew that he had made a silly mistake, but he couldn't give up on the opportunity to learn more about his opponent. He asked directly, "Which ones are you eyeing?" "Not interested. None are compatible with my ability or interests," Cragburst swiftly replied. "Then why are you watching? Maybe I'd cheat a loser, why not?" Cragburst laughed again. "Seems like the middleman hasn't contacted you yet. Perhaps it's because your information is all locked under security and he couldn't find a breakthrough point." "Middleman. Even if you didn't ask, I'd still have to warn you. Look, you're a psychic, an ability user with enhanced mental ability. Out of the reapings, there are really not many things that would capture your interest." Luo Nan faltered, but made a sound of affirmation. Cragbert continued with his explanation without skipping a beat. "For our society, besides going to the wilderness to try our luck. It is not often that we have the chance to accrue such a large haul while operating within the city. So the bidding right, especially for the first round, is extremely rare. If one were to use it carelessly or miss out, that would just be a waste. Luo Nan understood. You're saying to buy it for someone else. Someone from the society took an interest in a piece and they want it swapped out. Clever, but I must say, it might not be a person from the society. Outsiders can as well. Of course, as long as they come up with great goods mutual benefits, you know. The cutting-edge technology we got from the hall this time is fairly popular in the market. There have already been a few who have expressed an interest, especially in the two pieces that are still undergoing valuation. The starter prices for those even have me moved. Luo Nan had always thought about it, and hearing this confirmed struck a sensitive spot. He couldn't help but blurt out, "It's not Yan Yongbo, is it?" Yan Yongbo? No, it's an intermediary company. Hey, wait. The intel is getting out too quickly. Things are getting tense. Cragburst had always been hot-headed, but he was no fool. He slapped a hand down and exclaimed, "You don't say, it could well be true." Luo Nan grinned. "I don't want to fulfill his desires." Cragburst naturally picked up on Luo Nan's attitude towards Yan Yongbo and immediately became excited. "I'll go look into it. Wait for my intel. If it is true, we'll have to do things differently." He quickly hung up and went straight to work. Luo Nan pondered for a moment. He immediately followed both the Dynamo Core and the cerebral nucleus on the auction and logged out from the hexsphere. He laid on his bed and blinked. Although the desire to sleep was coming over him again, he kept thinking that he was missing something. Oh, right. He turned his head. He looked at the loose-leaf notebook that almost never left his side. It sat quietly on his bedhead, its black covers making it look like a gateway to the unknown. Luo Nan hoisted himself up against the bedhead and flipped to the flexible e-ink screen of the loose-leaf notebook. He scrolled through the other icons and stopped at the visualized diagram. On Friday night, the icon for the visualized diagram was still installing. Now, however, the area that was dimly emitting light seemed to have increased by a fraction. Sure enough, as soon as he checked, he saw that the progress had jumped from 2% to 6%. That was a threefold growth. Shouldn't he be happy? Shaking his head, Luo Nan swiped his finger across the screen, shutting it down. However, from within the screen, a thin, long needle slid out without a sound. Chapter 84, Hidden in the Void, Part 1-2. Translation, Sarah. Luo Nan eyed his Dynamo Core. He was sure that it was nearly twice as long as the Deep Sea Type 4. On top of that, the electrolyte that flowed within the core was more intense than before. This was probably because the models were different. In Luo Nan's opinion, Dynamo Cores were truly very strange. They had substance in the material plane, yet they constantly influenced the mental plane. With the mental and material planes interacting, its standing as an object blurred, as if its existence lied in the crack that separated the mental and material planes. There were truly many things worth researching. In his moment of thought, Luo Nan let the Dynamo Core merge into his brain. He wanted to see whether or not he could activate it like Jack had. Since I need to activate it, I'll need to give it a bit of stimulation. Unlike Jack, Luo Nan did not have specialized power transmission circuits. As such, he could not provide great electrical support. All Luo Nan had was the power of his soul. He also did not know what to do, so he simply let his soul power infiltrate into the core. This quickly became a kind of scientific study. The range of his mental senses sharply declined in exchange for a rise in precision. But for now, no matter how much the range had reduced, it was locked into a range of 10 meters. Additionally, no matter how much the accuracy had risen, it swayed within the millimeter range, far from his best record of 0.1 millimeters. This obviously wouldn't work. If one were to go by the standards of top-notch technology to determine the technological accuracy of the core would at least be in the nanometer range. That was 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter in accuracy, which was close to the atomic scale. Just the thought of it was devastating. However, Luo Nan still knew that within the core there was a bundle of brain chips. These brain chips were similar to the cell bodies in neurons and bore a huge amount of encoding conversions and was responsible for computing tasks. He knew this because last week, the core had undergone a certain degree of enlargement thanks to the abundant energy support of the independent power plant in the laboratory of gear. This provided an abundance of energy, which was obviously a more direct and effective method. Compared to the independent power station, Luo Nan's power was negligible. So as expected, the core did not respond. As expected, it's not easy. If I could get Jack's core application technology and use it on myself, that doesn't count as being a cyborg, right? Harboring these thoughts, Luo Nan sank into a muddled sleep. However, only half an hour had passed before he suddenly opened his eyes and moaned. "This won't do, it's too terrible." The idea that Mo Lun provided was expedient, but it was not a complete approach. In order to minimize the pressure on his body, Luo Nan made his body and soul semi-detached, allowing his soul to tilt more towards the mental plane. It was good at first, and the pressure on his body was reduced. There were no symptoms aside from lethargy, cough, and an occasional tightness in his chest. However, with time, as the soul delved deeper into the mental plane, side effects began to occur. Chaos, utter chaos. Regardless of how Luo Nan desensitized his soul, the basic Unit 1 was there. As long as soul configuration, the concept that he had learned from Jack, was in play, the operation of energy and information would not stop. All kinds of signals from the surrounding environment would always have certain effects, especially because this was the inpatient department of the hospital. In here, almost all of the living souls carried a sort of sickness. One or two would have been fine, but with up to a few hundred together, a gloomy mess of psychic waves constantly covered the various floors. For ordinary people, they would perhaps feel a little depressed. However, in the case of Luo Nan, he could hear the patient's cries of despair. Life was corrupted, energy and information collided, and everything was painted a dark gray color. Only half an hour had passed, and Luo Nan already felt depressed. This could not go on. Luo Nan tried to find a better place for his soul to rest. This type of place did exist in the mental plane. However, they were all in deep, dark, and quiet areas of the mental plane that were far from the material plane. He would be unable to maintain the semi-detached state of body and soul in this case. Wouldn't that cause him to return to an out-of-body state then? Luo Nan tossed and turned in the bed. He was intolerably sleepy, but the interference just wouldn't stop. This almost tortured him into contacting Mr. Bai, asking to be discharged. Isn't there a way to withstand the soul power without needing to come out from the body, huh? Luo Nan snapped his eyes open, turned around and grabbed the notebook from the bedhead. In a flash, the Dynamo Core with an unknown model seeped into his body from the palm of his hand and traveled all the way to his brain. He referred to the example of Jack and allowed the core to stop in the position between his left and right thalamus. He poured the concentration of his soul within the core, entering the mysterious crack in which the mental and the material planes interact. This could work. Ah, such quietness. It was like he was at the end of a deep, empty void. Luo Nan fell into a deep, stable sleep. When Luo Nan roused again, it was already 4:30 into the afternoon. This happened to be the visiting hours, so his aunt was in the ward, watching him as he woke. Aunt. Their eyes met. Luo Shuking's eyes were moist. Since yesterday night, she had lost it too many times. Not wanting to aggravate Luo Nan, she sucked in a breath and forced herself to speak calmly. Do you know how you came in here? I fell asleep on the car. Luo Nan put on an innocent face. In fact, he really didn't know how to alleviate his elder's worries. In a situation like this, he couldn't possibly puff out his chest and declare, "This type of thing won't ever happen again." On the contrary, these types of events would probably happen more and more often. Luo Nan's hesitation had, in turn, comforted Luo Shuking. Are you feeling better now? The doctor said you had a nervous breakdown. It's not serious, so you don't need to take medicine. Just take some supplements to stop the symptoms such as coughing and lethargy. Then you can go home. Luo Nan should ask about the situation, but at the moment he didn't feel like it. He simply smiled at Luo Shuking. It doesn't feel like a big deal. It's just like I skipped class for a day. I already enrolled you in a video course, and it starts tomorrow. As the conversation between the two returned to normal, a soft electronic sound rang out, and a familiar face appeared on the display panel. Mr. Zai Junping has come to visit. Luo Nan was surprised. This person sure got his intel fast. Luo Shuking was slightly shocked. Your friend. Vaho. At this moment, Zai Junping opened the door and strode in with large steps. He then hollered, Junior Nan, I heard that you fell sick and was admitted. What's the situation? He spotted Luo Shuking after he had spoken and froze. He looked through Luo Nan's profile and quickly realized the relationship between the two and bowed immediately. Hello, Mrs. Luo. I am Zai Junping, and I am also from Acumen College like Luo Nan. It must be said that before one saw through Zai Junping's facade, his sunny appearance really leaves a good impression. Luo Shuking's first impression of him was very positive. Luo Shuking was a very traditional woman. She wanted to speak more with her nephew, but since he had a guest, she decided to be polite. After exchanging a few words with Zai Junping, she excused herself and allowed the two youngsters to socialize. Zai Junping bowed as he saw Luo Shuking to the door. When he returned, he boasted, so it turns out that someone hasn't been sleeping all this time. He's just been hospitalized. Anyway, within these 3 days, all the information regarding the procedures of the Order Club, I've taken care of them. Basic Unit, introduced in Chapter 82.2. This was approximately 1% of the mental senses of his soul body. It was impossible to shrink it down any further. This preserved the current soul configuration and tempo to their lowest limits. This was a basic unit. Chapter 84, Hidden in the Void, Part 2-2. Zai Junping had said last week that Luo Nan would have to run around and do some formalities after entering the club. Unfortunately, Luo Nan had spent an entire day sleeping on Saturday. After that, he had gone to the medical treatment center to keep his grandfather company on Sunday, and on Monday, he went directly to the hospital. He had tossed all these matters aside, but luckily Zai Junping had picked all of it back up. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed. He spoke a word of thanks before he lowered his head to sign the electronic documents. Zai Junping was even at Luo Nan's side, explaining the purpose of every document. He later found out that Luo Nan didn't understand the contents at all and was just signing wholeheartedly. Luo Nan had displayed complete faith in Zai Junping, causing Zai Junping's heart to be at ease. Zai Junping simply started chatting. Of course, the topic never left the subject of gear. Junior Nan, you must despise the construction society, right? I don't think that you need to worry too much. It looks like the construction society drew in the Rainbow Fund in an effort to win, but the Mystic Arts Research Society aren't weaklings either. The people there have willfully leaped to action. They're bold enough to do anything. I have been looking into some rumors these past 2 days. They have quite the energy over there, all clamoring to wage war with the construction society. Compare things for a second. The Rainbow Fund is an investment company. In the end, don't they need to look at the profit from their investments? What if the manager of the Rainbow Fund goes crazy? Luo Nan stopped his digital pen for the first time. He raised his head to ask, over at Gear, outside of location and plans, aren't there some other resources in high quantities? I've really never heard of this before. Why do you think so? At the moment, the premium bids of the two parties aren't that particularly serious. Luo Nan didn't speak, since he had received the following piece of information from Crag Burst. After the conflict at the restaurant last night, Yan Yongbo started to exert his power over the matter with Gear. He took it as official business and even gave the lawyer a deadline. It seemed like someone had pressured him to do so. This was completely different from the private factor that he had guessed in the beginning. Additionally, the Mystic Arts Research Society side of things had an extremely serious background. Luo Nan was at the Limestone Water Village pub Friday night for an operation. During this time, he had discovered that this society actually had something to do with the Order of Justice. Previously, Luo Nan was apathetic towards the strength of secret orders. He hadn't been directly affected by them. But this time, there was a small little bloodflame order. The strength that its elder Mo Lun wielded had opened his eyes to the world. Extrapolating from this, since the Order of Justice had a strength that far exceeded the bloodflame order, it would certainly be a serious colossus. The bidding war between the Mystic Arts Research Society and the Construction Society seemed to have already broken away from the scope of school societies. The contest between their sponsors had entered a completely different realm. He just wished he was overthinking it. Naturally, the significance of gear was priceless from Luo Nan's perspective. He was confident that his mother's designs possessed the moving force of a classic masterpiece. But from the perspective of powers like the Quantum Corporation and the Order of Justice, where did the value of a building constructed in the wetlands lie? Luo Nan was itching to get back to school and immediately get to the bottom of this. It was now 5 o'clock, the end of the hospital's visiting time. It didn't matter whether it was Zai Junping or Luo Shuqing, they were all urged to leave. Finally, Luo Nan truly began his health pod treatment. He didn't have dinner, and he had to be loaded into the health pod completely naked. The most embarrassing thing was that Mr. Bai had personally come to supervise him. Luo Nan was seriously suspicious. This excessively cushy little old man had probably come to make fun of him. Don't be nervous. Aren't you wearing a ventilator? You can breathe, you know. Just pretend you're soaking in a bathtub for a nap. Oh right, you just woke up. Do you want to play a game then? There's even a game. Luo Nan couldn't open his mouth because he was wearing the breathing device. He could only look over with wide eyes. Through the Hexia, Mr. Bai switched to the Hexia's channel with a beaming smile. Aoyang implemented quite a few games on the Psychic Wave Network platform and updates it on a timely manner. Games like 10 Days in the Wilderness are also quite popular. Don't you youngins all love to play? Wait, don't jump to conclusions. Mr. Bai tapped against his forehead. I've heard that you can already use the computing level of the Hexia. Yes, it is as you say. This is a typical symptom of an imbalance between the body and the soul, and I can see that you've even learned to send your soul out on your own. You'll find it hard to stop at the imperfect fourth level, the simulator. What if you get addicted to playing and your soul strength increases further? Your troubles will become enormous. Simulator. It's similar to virtual reality. From the basic interactive applications to the automatic collection and operation of energy and information within the Hexia, one is cast free from the limits of the fleshly body and becomes able to manifest their self-logic on the psychic wave network. Luo Nan blinked his eyes and concluded with, "So it's the out-of-body state." Mr. Bai raised his eyebrows. "That's right. The brains of little guys really are fast. This is none other than the out-of-body state, also known as soul roaming. Your energy is protected while you're on the psychic wave network, reducing the dangers of one's first out-of-body experience to the minimum. You can try it in the future, but for now, you absolutely can't. Not only should you refrain from playing games, you should also refrain from entering the out-of-body state. There's also meditation." "Oh right, can you meditate?" "I can do a bit of visualization. Isn't that pretty much the same?" "It's all the same. The use of all methods that can increase your soul's strength is prohibited. Visualization is no longer purely a thought-based game at your current level. There will be a moment where you gather and operate energy and information. In doing, you will bring enormous pressure to your fleshly body. A true and complete imbalance. By then, you will die a welcomed death." This one talk by Mr. Bai knocked Luo Nan back to the coldness of reality. He could only force a bitter smile for the time being. These were the facts. If he hadn't learned the makeshift plan and later gained the Dynamo Core, then Luo Nan would certainly be as good as dead right now. The Dynamo Core was important because it allowed him to entrust his soul within it and eliminated the pressure. Mr. Bai continued with the intimidation of a tiger to make Luo Nan understand the severity of the matter. But after a while, he gave Luo Nan a resolution. "Since you can't play games, just go and chat with someone. This old man isn't going to keep you company, so just go find anyone else. Crag Burst likes to chat, and it looks like the secretary treats you quite well. Additionally, she's a beautiful woman." Luo Nan rolled his eyes before the nutrient solution could cover his head. "Oh right, I'll go find Aoyang to grant your privileges. Children have always been unreliable." The old mister was as good as his word. He patted his butt and left. Luo Nan really admired this old grandfather, but to be messed with like this really made him relax quite a bit. The nutrient solution hadn't reached his head, so he didn't feel uncomfortable. But soon, Luo Nan would have to face reality. He really couldn't sleep. There were too many things on his mind, yet he couldn't grasp the main points. His mind was quite messy, and he even felt that his cranial nerves were especially excited. It was very exhausting. Was he really going to go chat? Helplessly, Luo Nan flipped through his friends list within the Hexia. On the list were just He Yuan, Crag Burst, Octopus, Yan Yongbo, Mr. Bai, and so on. Just these few people. Who should he choose? Right when Luo Nan was tangled in this thoughts, someone took the initiative to chat with him. A greenish-gray octopus head popped up. Bro, Octopus. My junior, have you entered the health pod yet? Yes, I'm inside already. Luo Nan had already made contact with Octopus before entering treatment. They had negotiated over the matter of the nutrient solution drug concoctions. As a professional, Octopus had given Luo Nan several useful suggestions. He wanted Luo Nan to get in contact with a suitable pharmaceutical chemist. Octopus' scope within the realm of professionals did not end with Xia City, but included the entire world. He offered to contact Dr. Clay of Los Angeles, USA, for the sake of recommending Luo Nan an authority in the field of neurogeneration. There was already an outcome at this time. Junior, there's new information. Chapter 85, Bai Xinyan, Part 1-2. Translator, Sarah. There was laughter in Octopus' words. You could tell that the task was almost done. Our luck isn't bad. Dr. Clay is fairly interested in a case like yours and has already decided to take over. I have already prepaid. Brother Octopus. Well, can't let me take advantage of you, huh? Your nerve medication needs to be set aside. A considerable portion of the neurons it targets include the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nerves. If these nerves are already damaged and continue to be stimulated, it is hard to say how things will turn out. With me saving these costs, wouldn't it be the same as me getting your grandpa's molecular formula for? That's not how it works. It is exactly how it works. Right, there's another problem. At the moment, Dr. Clay has a project and can't leave, so he sent the students under him to do the preliminary data collection and test around next week. As for Dr. Clay, he may need until the end of the month before he can come. End of the month? Luo Nan was shocked and immediately felt his scalp go numb. Does this mean that he would have to bathe in this kind of nutritional bath for another month? He hesitated for a moment and finally voiced out, wouldn't that be too long? Octopus laughed and said, 1 month is not long. It's not even one full course of treatment. It's not like you'll continue to stay at the hospital. I asked Mr. Bai already. As long as the symptoms of lethargy and the cough are suppressed, then you can be discharged at any time. You'll only need to report once every alternate evening and do the specialized treatment. In terms of the fees, the society will reimburse it. After all, this does classify as a work injury. Having heard that, Luo Nan realized that Octopus and Mr. Bai had kept in contact. At this moment, the light blue liquid in the health pod had completely covered Luo Nan's head. Although he wore filters, earplugs, and other protective equipment, the strange, sticky, slippery feeling still became more and more prominent. Luo Nan was not new to this type of feeling due to his experiences when he was young. With the current accuracy of his senses, he could vaguely make out the ingredients in the nutritional liquid. As small amounts seeped into his body, it caused an impact on the internal secretion of chemical substances in his body. Luo Nan could not help but carefully analyze these minute changes habitually. In the past, he was only able to get an approximate feel, but now his senses had become much more fine-tuned. The operational efficiency of the energy and information had also increased without him realizing it. Oh no! Luo Nan was startled awake, quickly halting his urge to observe. Even then, his whole body ached, and he had even broken out into a cold sweat. Were they trying to treat him or to harm him? If Luo Nan had to experience this for another month, he would want to die. He tossed and turned, lingered for a bit, and spaced out. Octopus could only call him again. "Hey, bro, what happened? Are you feeling all right?" "I'm fine." Luo Nan couldn't say that he had brought upon himself, but he couldn't help but whine. "It feels really bad in here." He suspected that his long-held indifference towards health pods would be totally subverted after this month-long treatment period. You'll get used to it. I'm actually quite envious of you." "Brother Octopus." "It's true, I'm not kidding." Octopus could not sympathize with Luo Nan at this moment as his attention was elsewhere. "Did you know the student that Doctor sent is Bai Xinyan? She is deemed the magic flower of the pharmaceutical world and is an absolute beauty. She does not lose out to your secretary." Luo Nan decided to not comment. However, Octopus just became more excited. Tusk, she sure was hot. Back when I was at Xia City, I would definitely have wooed her if not for Mr. By watching so closely. Think about it, to be able to spend a month with such a beauty. No, even if it was only 3 weeks, what I wouldn't trade for such a chance. Luo Nan blanked out. "Mr. Bai." "Yeah, she's Mr. Bai's daughter and is also a mentally enhanced ability user. However, she is also talented in the pharmaceutical field. She's Dr. Clay's best student and is even better than him in some aspects." Right, you have to remember that the father-daughter relationship between her and Mr. Bai is not very good. It seems like the reason why she went to America and had not returned all these years was also because of this. So make sure you don't use your relationship with Mr. Bai as an excuse to get close to her. If trouble arises, don't say that I didn't warn you. Sure. Luo Nan was utterly defeated by Octopus. "Well, that's it. Right, if staying in the health pod feels bad and you want someone to talk to, I'll do it free of charge just for tonight." There had been a few showers, and the weather was gradually getting chiller. The skies of Xia City had grown dark progressively earlier today. The weather was cloudy with no rain. The crisp weather of autumn was nowhere to be found. In the VIP resting lounge of the Xia City Air Harbor, Yan Yongbo sat quietly on the sofa. He sported schooled features and great posture. He had an air of a successful businessman, and his poise was even greater than the director of Quantum Corporation's Xia City branch, Hu Yuli. However, Hu Yuli didn't mind this. He casually rested whilst sipping tea and occasionally glancing at the huge projector screen. At this moment, a special program made by the Star Associated Press was playing. A host who spoke very fast asked the experts, "Why are the deep blue walkers appearing in Xia City? It seems like the military has never put this force in any metropolitan area, let alone fight in it. This would be the first time in history." Expert A, the man was expressionless as he told it blandly stated the facts. There had actually been cases in the past. From memory, it occurs once every 90 years, but it's not because the military is undergoing missions. There should be other instances of this occurring, but they keep quiet about it, and so it is often looked over by the public. The host immediately skipped this boring response and turned to Expert B. "Most of us are under the impression that the deep blue walkers always appeared in places like the wilderness and the ocean, and that they always engaged in combat with mutants. This reinforces to us the stereotype that any place where the deep blue walkers appear must be extremely dangerous." The knowing smile that stretched across Expert B's face showed that he knew the host was digging for a scoop. He complied. "Not only do we need to take note of the deep blue walker's appearance, but we also need to pay attention to the response speed of the government and the military. The numbers of the Deep Blue Walkers are limited. There are only 4 divisions in the world, which is suboptimal. They usually operate in groups. As a summary from various sources, the number of Deep Blue Walkers that appeared at dawn on the 1st was very great, and there is even a very small possibility of a temporary transfer. This means they were always nearby, and could even be on standby in Xia City. As for why, we can only see how it progresses and continue to salvage information from various sources. Expert B did not supply any solid evidence, but instead left room for imagination. The host was satisfied. Now we will cut in with a short clip, which will help us understand more about Deep Blue Walkers. At this moment, a melodious bell sound rang through the resting lounge, indicating that the airship that they awaited had arrived at the airspace. Hu Yuli and all the other passengers stood up. Only Yan Yongbo watched on while seated. When Luo Nan meets Octopus the second time, Luo Nan makes a deal with Octopus to have Octopus produce the mind-sculpting drugs in exchange for the molecular formula. That's a wrap for this installment. Thank you all for watching and supporting Lord of the Stories. If you enjoyed this tale, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more amazing stories. You can also explore other series updated daily in our playlists. Have a fantastic day and see you in the next episode.